From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Nearly 600 members of Colombia's indigenous communities arrived to Bogota after a 5-day journey to condemn the massacres they face in their territories. More on this report.
After traveling for 5 days, about 500 people from indigenous communities in Chocó arrived in Bogota. They are here to condemn the many massacres they have witnessed on their lands, as well as forced displacement and the lack of security guarantees from the government.
This government has turned back our rights. They haven't given us guarantees for our lives or our land. They haven't been willing to talk to us, so we are forced into taking this sort of action.
Security forces were unable to stop the protesters, who decided to start a peaceful march after their buses were blocked from advancing.
They are not respecting us as indigenous campesinos. We couldn't sleep all night. We had to walk all through the night.
Holding a stick that represents the defense of indigenous lives and lands, the protesters call this a historic battle.
We are following the path set by our ancestors. We are standing up for their legacy.
This is why they have condemned the return of violence after President Iván Duque came to power.
Armed conflict has gotten worse in our lands due to the presence of illegal groups in the region. We are being displaced, we are being confined, we are being threatened. There have even been conflicts within our communities.
Protesters reached the headquarters of the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia, where they plan to remain until President Iván Duque responds to their demands. They want guarantees that the rights of indigenous communities will be respected.
The InterAmerican Commission on Human Rights has said it is concerned about human rights in Brazil following the recent election of President-elect Jair Bolsonaro. Speaking at a media brief, the Commission's presidents say they are particularly worried about the future of Brazil's minorities once Bolsonaro assumes power on the 1st of January next year. In the run-up to the polls, Bolsonaro continuously made derogatory comments against blacks, women, and LGBT community.
We're concerned because of these statements and what we in the international human rights community designate clear hate speeches that were made. So we're very concerned, and this is why we'll closely monitor.
One of the main proposals of President-elect Jair Bolsonaro is to make it easier for Brazilians to carry weapons, but many experts say they will not stop violence and crime in the country.
Most of the victims of violence in Brazil are young black people from poor families, often living in the favelas of the big cities. Nearly 64,000 people were murdered in 2017. That's an average of 175 homicides per day.
20,000 of the victims are young black people, and you can see that often this kind of lethal violence is caused by the presence of weapons and by a police force that doesn't prevent but only punishes.
During his campaign for October's election, the president-elect Jair Bolsonaro promised to give people freer access to guns, reduce the age of criminal responsibility to 16, and allow the security forces to use more aggressive tactics against the criminals.
People do not trust the police because the police already go in and do what they want, and there is no one to answer for it. You cannot complain, and the state is not, in fact, seen to be providing security. We believe this measure will only make the situation worse. We also see it as an economic measure. Bolsonaro has promised this not to provide security for the people, but to benefit the arms industry.
Disputes between rival gangs, the economic recession, and cuts in the budgets for public security have all contributed to the increase in crime. More than 10,000 murders of women, just on gender grounds, are currently being investigated by the police.
We had a campaign all this year called Stop Killing Us, Stop Killing Women Indiscriminately. When a woman is killed, there are also children left behind. Almost all women killed this year had small children who are also victims of that violence. It is quite a critical situation, a reality that we have to work to change, and we won't change it with more weapons and more violence.
Figures show that more than 5,000 people died last year at the hands of the police. Experts say that an ever higher proportion of violence is a direct consequence of actions that are meant to stop it.
A small group from the first migrant caravan in Mexico has already reached Tijuana on the U.S. border, but the bulk of the caravan is still in its way to Guadalajara. Our correspondent in Irapuato, Pablo Perez, has more.
Well, today we're right here at the outskirts of Irapuato city in the state of Guanajuato, Mexico. And right now we're seeing how all these migrants, they are members of the first migrant caravan, are trying to board freight trailers to go all the way to Guadalajara, Jalisco, which is the next stop scheduled for this caravan. Right now we can see that very common image of the migrants riding the train that they name the Beast. It's no longer the most usual way to travel for them. They are trying to get a ride from the freight drivers, and well, this is something really different, because there is some willingness to do that. It has to be. There is the police officers. They are asking every driver if they are taking the migrants by their own will, or they are getting paid, or because getting paid for that will be considered a misdemeanor. But if the driver says, no, I'm giving them a ride from my own goodwill, they cannot stop him. So this is another way for them to get faster to the border. And let's remember that we have already covered over 700 miles, but we have 1,500 on our way to go to Tijuana. That's the border with San Diego, California, which is the entry point. Most of these migrants will consider their destiny. And well, we will go on informing you, and we'll go back to the study.
Thank you, Pablo, for that report. And the journey to the U.S. has proven to be even more difficult for members of the LGBT community who are also part of the caravans. Many have reportedly faced hostility from local residents after reaching the city of Tijuana as part of the first caravan. They arrived at the local bus station to go to a shelter that was provided by a donor. Before they could even get through the door, they were met with opposition from neighbors who voiced their disapproval at their presence.
We're surprised, impacted, we're uncomfortable because the authorities didn't consider us. There is a municipal president here, a delegation that should have told us. Neighbors were asking for your support, your collaboration. People are going to come.
As the main caravan continues its journey, a separate group is quickly approaching Mexico City from the southern state of Veracruz. Several groups of migrants have joined together to travel through the state on the Mexico's Gulf Coast. Some walk down the highway, while others jump on the back of a truck to catch a ride north. The migrants are en route to the U.S. border, where President Donald Trump has effectively suspended the possibility of asylum for any person who crosses into the country illegally.
We're looking for help, to get rides on trailers or something like that, to leave the state of Veracruz. Sometimes rumors come up of someone going missing of one thing or another. We prefer to arrive in Puebla and keep advancing from there. Wherever we are, we advance north as much as we can.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The Argentine Senate will be discussing the national budget for 2019 in a special session on Wednesday. The bill has already been approved by the lower house. Experts argue that if the bill is approved, the public sector and society will suffer greatly.
People are feeling the pressure of living under austerity due to the government's adjustments. They're suffering and they've had enough. They're turning to their MPs with their complaints and want them to find a way out of this turmoil.
What we are seeing now is not only a budget cut that means the erosion of our sectors, but also the denial of basic human rights.
The government has managed to get the 2019 budget to the Senate. The bill proposed by the ruling party has the approval of the lower house. If passed, the budget in public spending will be significantly slashed and the economy will go down by 5%, according to analysts. The new law will guarantee the interest of the International Monetary Fund and of international corporations.
Argentina is going to have to spend the next years with conflicting priorities. So, instead of worrying about the great internal debt to the social movements, workers, and public sectors, they're going to worry about the brutal external debt. And this is going to hurt the majority of people.
As part of a $57 billion agreement with the International Monetary Fund, the government of Mauricio Macri agreed to decrease its subsidies and cut public jobs.
It's a budget focused on decreasing public spending. That's going to hurt a lot of people. And it's a budget lacking credibility because in the 2019 projections, they talk about 23% inflation.
On Wednesday, the bill will be put before the Senate to advance the adjustment plans. Through this, many believe the government hopes it can better integrate with the nations of the G20, who are set to visit Argentina by the end of this month.
The lower house in Chile is set to debate a controversial education bill this week. The bill aims to punish teachers and students who use abusive language in educational institutions. It gives school principals the power to expel students immediately if they are heard using such language. The government is confident that the bill will be approved. The general strike in Costa Rica against the tax reform supported by the government of Carlos Alvarado has entered its 10th week. On Monday, teacher unions ratified the legality of this strike and presented a complaint to the International Labour Organization. On Friday, the education sector presented a complaint against the government, condemning violations of trade union freedom. This strike started back in September to protest a tax reform that could hurt those most vulnerable. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia brings us more.
It's been 2 months since the indefinite general strike started. Recently, more than 8,000 education workers and government employees joined the strike. A large part of the debate about the strike has been its legality, with different courts upholding its legality since it started back in September 10th. This has seen a huge support to the labor sector against the tax reform, which is being debated right now in the Constitutional Court. This court has to decide if the reform is unconstitutional or not. If they approve it, it will then move to the Legislative Assembly as a final step before being approved. Still, discussions about other ways to overcome the tax deficit in Costa Rica continue.
Trinidad and Tobago was rocked by a 3.9 magnitude earthquake on Sunday night, the latest in a series that rocked the island. It was also felt in neighboring Grenada. No injuries or damage were sustained. A warning was issued earlier this month about moderate to strong earthquakes following a 6.9 quake that struck in August. Iran's cancer patients have been finding it extremely difficult to receive treatment and buy medication due to the recently reimposed U.S. sanctions. The chief of the Cancer Institute explained that the sanctions are stopping citizens from buying medication and medical devices. Patients have seen their treatment costs increase over the past few weeks.
Now, when they impose sanctions on our banks, the money cannot be transferred easily to a foreign country in order to buy medication. These sanctions are non-humanitarian.
These health clinics, with these sanctions, are not able to respond to 500,000 patients. The government should increase the health centers, add more funds, and give additional support to a large number of cancer patients.
The president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, has vowed to never allow Gaza to be separated and isolated from the rest of Palestine. In a televised address to the nation, Abbas said unity was the strongest weapon that the people of Palestine have in the face of aggression by forces against Palestinian statehood.
Our national unity is the most precious thing we have, and it is our strongest weapon to face the plans for liquidation and conspiracies that are being waged against our national cause. The attempts to separate Gaza from the homeland will not succeed.
Amnesty International has withdrawn its most prestigious human rights prize for Myanmar's state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. In a statement, the organization has accused her of perpetuating human rights abuses by not speaking out about violence against Rohingya Muslim minority. Once seen as a champion in the fight for democracy, Suu Kyi has been stripped of a series of international honors over what has been described as her betrayal of her values. Meanwhile, thousands of Rohingya Muslims are fleeing Bangladesh refugee camps in fear of being repatriated to Myanmar. Authorities are reportedly planning on launching the repatriation of Rohingya refugees this coming Thursday, despite the fear of most refugees to return to Myanmar. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your green zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. an occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A court in South Africa has sentenced 3 men to life in prison for kidnapping, raping, and murdering a university student. The 4 men stood accused of raping and murdering 22-year-old university student Hannah Cornelius. They received sentences exceeding 100 years each on 4 counts of robbery, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count attempted murder. A fire at a boarding school in Uganda has killed at least 11 students and left 20 more with serious burns. The fire swept through dormitories at the St. Bernard Secondary School on Sunday night. School authorities blamed the fire on arsonists. 3 people, including a guard at the school, have been arrested for questioning.
The one who did it came and put a padlock on these 2 rooms. They put 2 padlocks on these 2 rooms and then burned. So it was a little bit difficult for the students to get out of the room.
Tensions are high in Florida as the U.S. state is holding a recount of votes for the Senate and governor following midterm election last week. Unofficial results show Republican Rick Scott lead the race for Senate over Democrat Bill Nelson by 0.14%, while Republican Ron DeSantis led over Democrat Andrew Gillum for governor by only 0.41%. The state has until Thursday to finish the recount.
That we count every single.
At least 31 people have died in 2 big wildfires that have swept California since Thursday. More than 100 people are still being searched by authorities and emergency services in the affected areas in the north and south of the state. The fire in the north is one of the deadliest and most destructive in California's history, consuming much of the town of Paradise.
We don't know the cause of this fire, and the town of Paradise certainly had a lot of preparation, but we're dealing with existential conditions that once they take off, there's a certain amount of dryness in the vegetation, in the soil, in the air, then the winds get up 50, 60 miles an hour. This is what happens, and we have to keep understanding it better, but we're in a new abnormal, and things like this will be part of our future. And this won't be the beginning. It'll be things like this and worse.
Teachers are on a strike in France for the first time since 2011. More on that and a look at other stories from around the world.
Teachers in France have taken to the streets of Paris to protest against job cuts in state and private schools. It's believed that the 2019 budget will lead to over 3,000 job cuts. According to the Education Ministry, around 10% of teachers nationwide were on strike. However, unions put the figure much higher at 50%. Teachers from primary, middle and high schools are striking for the first time since 2011.
At present, we feel like everything is going downwards. They're reducing our hours. They're reducing our budget. They tell us things that do not make sense compared to the reality of the field. They say we are a form of excellence, while everything is in fact breaking down.
Iran is to be cut off from the international financial messaging system, SWIFT. This means it will be increasingly difficult for it to get paid for exports and pay for imports. Banks have started to inform their local branches of this action. The decision was made due to pressure from the United States after it withdrew from the nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions on Iran. SWIFT chief executive called the move regrettable but said it has been taken in the interest of the stability and integrity of the global financial system. Palestinians have buried several of their dead who were killed by Israeli forces in Khan Yunis in Gaza. Clashes broke out after Israeli forces tried to infiltrate the area. Israeli planes were also deployed as reinforcements. The area falls under territory occupied in 1948 during the creation of Israel.
Stan Lee, the creator of iconic heroes such as Spider-Man, Iron Man, and the Hulk, has passed away at the age of 95. As writer and editor at Marvel Comics, Lee was a key to the growth of the company into a comic book titan in the 1960s. He was widely credited with adding a new layer of complexity and humanity to superheroes. Lee's legacy extended to the film industry, where movies starring nearly all of his major creations have grossed over $20 billion in theaters worldwide. The cause of his death is still unknown. Well, we come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.